with R's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the Team Associated B74.2 bag 4. So let's get started. All right, so there's these two shims. I'm assuming these shims might be specifically for these pinion gears. So we'll keep those separate. I'm gonna keep them in the packaging. That way they don't get mixed up. And bag 4 also contains all the bearings from what it looks like. If you follow my channel and you've seen my other builds, I will always recommend that you open up all the seals off of every bearing that you can, clean them out with some brake cleaner or some type of bearing cleaner, and then lube them up with some bearing oil. No matter whether they're a low quality bearing or a high quality bearing, most of these bearings will be filled with grease. I'm gonna go ahead and open up all these seals and then get them ready to clean. I'm not gonna do a whole video about it. I've already done one, so I'll put a link in the description below or put a card up so that way y'all can go check it out. All right, so I don't think any of these bearings have grease in them. All the ones I've opened up, they're not greased at all. So, and they'll rotate pretty freely. This one actually has some grease in it. It's the first one, but most of them rotate very freely. So it's a good thing I checked, and I'm just gonna go ahead and open them all up and clean them out. So I definitely think it's worth the extra step. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I've had people ask me if I run ceramic bearings after seeing how smooth my bearings are in my car, and they're usually surprised to hear that I don't run ceramic bearings. I just maintain my bearings regularly with this method, clean them out with brake cleaner, let it air dry, blow it out with air, and then put 1 or 2 drops of bearing oil in there. So the bearings might be a little tight initially when you get them, but run it for a few packs and then they'll break in, wear in, and they should be running nice and smooth. All right, for these small bearings, I'm not too concerned because they're not going to be really rotating the wheels or the transmission or anything like that. These are going to be for the steering assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in a little baggie and set those aside so I don't lose them, and I know I'll be using them in step 6, or I mean bag 6. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and go spray these bearings with some brake parts cleaner or carb cleaner and make sure that all the grease is washed out. Then I'll come back and put these back together. Okay, so the bearings are now ready. Now we can continue on with the build. I highly recommend that you clean your bearings and do this. I did find a few bearings that had grease in them, so definitely take the time to do this because you'll be ensuring that your car is in optimal condition when you start racing. All right, so we're gonna start with the front gearbox. So we're gonna need one diff gear pinion, one of the flanged bearings. It's an M5 by 10 by 4 flanged bearing. We're going to need one of the diff pinion gear shims. It's an M5 by 6.5 by 1, which I believe is in this bag. What sucks is that they don't actually have all the sizes of the shims in the front on page 3, so you know, definitely take your time and measure. Definitely not the right ones. There's a 5mm ID, 8mm OD, and 0.2 thickness. So not the one that we need. Might be these shims here. Yeah. So it's going to be these shims. Are black and they look like they might be aluminum. But we need these shims here. They're in the bag of hardware. So we have these two. We're going to need another flanged bearing. And we're going to need the number 2 inboard gearbox. So the gearbox is going to be this one that we need, and we need the number 2. So it'll show this one is 0 and this one is a number 2. So we need the number 2 one. So now what we're going to do is we're going to install the M5 by 6.5 by 1 shim onto the pinion shaft. Next, we're going to install the flanged bearing, and the rubber seal is going to be facing the pinion gear itself. Like so. Then we're going to go ahead and insert the pinion shaft or pinion gear into the gearbox, just like so. And then we're going to install the flange bearing again on the outside with the rubber seal facing outward, like so. And it spins nice and free, so pretty excited about that. Next, we're going to get ready to install our differential. So I'm going to grab my differential. We're going to need the outboard gearbox, and there is a difference between the two. I'm trying to see if there's any marking. Yeah, so there's actually a marking on the inside. So this is the 0 and that is the 2. So we're gonna want the number 2. We have our number 2. We're gonna need 2 M3 by 14 button head screws. You can use the grease that came in the kit. I like to use this Teflon gearbox grease from Ultimate Racing. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this. We're gonna need 2 diff shims. It doesn't really tell you the size, but they're gonna be these. There's 4 of them in the bag. So we need 2 of those. And we're gonna need 2 M10 by 15 by 4 bearings. So we wanna install the shims onto the shaft of the differential. They say to install it 1 on each side, and then we're going to install the bearings with the rubber seals facing outward. Next, we're going to install the differential into the gearbox, and the gear is going to be facing the left side, like so. So with the differential installed, we can put some grease on the gears. Don't necessarily have to do it right now. I think what I'm going to do first is install the cover, and since the bottom is open, I can install the grease from the bottom. So what's nice is that there's a little Associated logo on there. So we can install the gearbox cover just like so. Associated logo right here, and the two M3x14 screws are going to go in these two holes here and here. And remember, you're going into plastic, so you don't need to tighten down too hard. Once it's shouldered up, it's good. And it looks like the diff is too tight, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the shim on one side and reinstall it because it's not even spinning. Okay, so I'm going to take the shim off the diff ring side, the gear side. And then I'm going to go ahead and, so I'm going to remove the shim from the gear side, and I'm going to add it onto the cup side over here. So again, it's going to be on the left side. Let's go ahead and install the cover. Okay, so when I had two shims on the cup side, it was still binding up in a few spots. It was very notchy. So I only have one shim on the cup side over here, and it's nice and smooth, so that's what you want. You know, you got to follow the instructions to some extent, but then you got to know, you know, when it's just not the way it's supposed to be. So, and now I'm just gonna add a little bit of grease on these gears just to kind of quieten it down. Don't want to put too much because it's just gonna fling everywhere and cause a mess. So making sure all the teeth are covered. Even though it's sealed, I'm going to try to get as much excess wiped off. I just don't want it to attract any dirt. All right, so now we can get our CVA bone. We need the 64 millimeter, just like so. We're going to need our Cva barrel, the pin, our Cva input coupler, and Cva cup center. So here we're going to use the black grease on the Cva barrel and just give it a thin coat. So we're going to insert the Cva barrel into the bone, and you want to make sure that you can see the hole that's in the barrel. So next what you're going to do is line up the hole in the coupler with the hole in the barrel. And then you want to insert the pin through both of them, just like so, and that pin will lock it into place. So now we're going to need the M4 by 5 set screw. Looks like one of the shims, the thin shim that was in the bag that had the 2 shims in it. We need one of those. And we're going to need some thread locker. So what it looks like is we're going to put the Cva cup over the coupler, and this is actually going to hold the pin into place. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to install the shim onto the pinion shaft of the gearbox, like so. And then if you look closely at the pinion shaft, there's an actual drilled hole in the shaft. And so we're going to install the M5 or M4 by 5 set screw to line up and go into that hole. So I guess it doesn't matter that the Cva cup, this blue anodized piece, can rotate freely. I guess it's just really there to hold that pin into place. So there we go. So that's the front gearbox. Now we got to build the rear. So we're going to set this aside for now. So the rear gearbox, there's only one instead of the 2 that came with the front. So let's get that off the parts tree. So we have our rear. We're going to need this particular piece. We're also going to need the pinion height insert. The pinion height insert are these. One has a 3 and another one has a 2. And on the 3 one, there's also a 0 and a 1. So the kit setup is the 2. So go ahead and grab that one. And then we're also going to need the number 2 and 1 diff height inserts, so we can get those. Okay, so now we're going to need 2 of the flanged bearings. We're going to need our pinion and the M5 by 6.5 by 1 shim. So we can start by putting the shim onto the pinion shaft. Then we're going to install the flanged bearing, the M5 by 10 by 4, with the rubber side facing the pinion gear. Then we're going to install it in this pinion height insert. Then we're going to install the other flanged bearing with the rubber seal facing outward, just like so. Now we have the bottom of the gearbox. It's this piece here. We're going to install the pinion with this insert in this channel here, there's actually grooves cut out for the grooves on this insert. And we want the number 2 facing up. So it has a number 2 written on top here and a number 1 over here. So you want the number 2 facing up. Just like so. That's how the pinion installs. Now we're going to need our other differential, our rear differential, along with 2 of the large shims. We have an extra one since we didn't use it on the front. And we're also going to need 2 M10 by 15 by 4 bearings, along with our diff height inserts. So we're going to start off by putting 1 shim on each side. Then we're going to install the M10 by 15 by 4 bearing with the rubber seals facing outward. Then we're going to install the diff inserts, and we're going to install the diff inserts with the number 2 facing up. So we want to install the gear ring on the right side of the gearbox. So if this is the pinion, we want the gear to be on the right side. Everything seems nice and smooth so far. So let's move forward with installing the top of the gearbox. So this is the top of the gearbox. The front is where the pinion insert is going to install. It's got 2 grooves. So you can go ahead and install that. Everything still moves nice and free. So we're going to need 4 M3 by 10 button head screws. And the screws are going to install in these 4 holes. Okay, so I feel like the transmission or the rear gearbox rotates pretty freely. Yeah, so it moves pretty freely. I'm pretty happy with it. I did tighten in a crisscross pattern, so that way I'm not applying uneven force when I'm tightening it down and possibly causing any binding. So there we go. The instructions are missing the fact to add some grease to the gears. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So don't forget to do that. You don't need to put a lot of grease, just some dabs, and it'll eventually work its way into all the gears. There you go. And even though it's sealed, I'm gonna try to get any excess off, just so it doesn't attract any dirt or debris. Okay, so now we can get our rear CVA bone attached. So we need our rear CVA bone, which is 95 millimeters. We're gonna need our CVA barrel. We're gonna need a shim, our CVA coupler, and CVA cup. And we're also going to need our pin. So we can start by putting some grease onto the Cva barrel. So just need a nice light coating on there. And so we're going to install this barrel into the Cva bone with the hole visible through this channel right here. So next what we're going to do is take our Cva input coupler and line up the hole in there with the hole in the Cva barrel. And then we're going to insert our pin through both of them. Okay, just like so. It's locked into place. Now we can install our Cva cup over it all. And we want to make sure that the Cva cup hole lines up with the hole in the coupler, just like so. So on our rear gearbox assembly, we're going to find the drilled pocket that's in the pinion gear. Face that up. We're going to install our shim. Next, we're going to grab our M4 by 5 millimeter set screw. Going to apply some blue Loctite on there. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to line up the holes with the drilled pocket and install the M4 by 5 millimeter set screw. And if you've installed it correctly, you should be able to rotate the Cva cup, this blue anodized piece, around, and there you go. So now the front and rear gearbox is ready to install onto the chassis. We're going to grab our chassis. So we're going to install the front first. So the front gearbox is going to install using these 4 holes here and also these 2 holes here. So we need 4 M3 by 12 flathead screws. We're going to need 2 M3 by 12 button head screws. So we can line up the gearbox, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the 2 M3 by 12 button head screws here and here first, and then I'll flip over the chassis and install the flathead screws. So I'm just going to get them started and then make sure I can get everything started and installed, and then I will go back and tighten everything down. So the M3 by 12 flathead screws are going to install in these 4 holes. Okay, front gearbox is installed. Everything still moves nice and smooth. You want to make sure anytime you're dealing with the gearbox or anything that's moving, that every step you take to add screws to the assembly, that it's not causing any binding. So see that everything is moving nice and smooth. So you can continue on to installing the rear gearbox. So the rear gearbox is going to install in these 4 holes on the chassis, and then in these 2 holes on the center brace. So let's go ahead and line that up. And we're going to need 4 M3 by 12 flathead screws. and 2 M3x12 button head screws. So I'm going to go ahead and install the 2 button head screws on top first and get those started, and then I'll flip the chassis over and get the other ones started, and then finally tighten it down. Alright, so everything still moves nice and smooth. That's exactly what we want. So that concludes bag 4. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed some of the tips and seeing some of the issues that I went through. So to recap, I'm only using 1 shim on the cup side of the diff in the front, and I'm using both shims in the rear. Other than that, no other real modifications needed to make things work. The one thing I did recommend is cleaning out the bearings, and that'll make everything nice and super smooth. So please do that. You'll definitely see the benefit of it. So thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Leave comments down below if you had any issues or if you have any questions. I'll do my best to help you out. And stay tuned for the next video, which is bag 5.